Welcome back to Truth in the Dark, where light cuts through the shadows of an ever-darkening world. Episode 2, The Atheist Unscientific Faith. The Atheist Unscientific Faith. Now, before the atheists in the audience click away, stick with me, because today we're not just going to read Bible verses and wag fingers. We're going to laugh a little, look at science, and see why denying God is kind of like denying gravity while falling off a roof. In America today, there's a large and growing group known as the non-religious. It's a mixed bag. Atheists who flat out deny God, agnostics who aren't sure if there is a God, and others who simply invent a God that conveniently agrees with everything they already believe. In other words, congratulations, you've just promoted yourself to deity. This group now makes up 28% of Americans, this non-religious group, and the number climbs higher every year. Now, some have said atheism is a faith or a religion. Let's test that claim today, shall we? Religion answers the same important human questions. There's about 6 of them. Number 1, where did we come from? Why are we here? How should we live? Why do we suffer? What happens when we die? And is there someone beyond us? Now, does atheism have an answer to these religious questions? Let's check it out. Number 1, where do we come from? Well, they believe in the beginning, dirt, or nothing. Depends on who you ask. And then you have the Big Bang evolution, and here we are. Number 2, why are we here? Well, to prolong our species, create our own meaning. And how should we live? Well, morality through human reason, empathy, and social constructs. Why do we suffer? Part of the natural order, they say, makes for a stronger species. What happens when we die? Well, you return to stardust, because stars blown up is how you got here. And then, is there someone beyond us? They just say no. So atheism apparently answers all the same questions that a world religion would answer. But the atheist will strongly protest at this point and say it's not religion because our answers come from science. Well, let's test that truth claim, shall we? Let's test that truth claim. According to a leading atheist, nothing expanded into everything. You heard that right, folks. Nothing expanded into everything. That's by Richard Dawkins, a leading atheistic mind in our modern times. In his book, The God Delusion, it says, and I quote, "Nothing is very unstable, and it's very likely that something will come from nothing." Well, to be fair to Mr. Dawkins, his idea of nothing is bits of quantum energy and gravity cooking up. And what it's cooking up is a bomb that literally defies the laws of physics, and that's the Big Bang. So they believe that nothing brought everything. That is something that is unseen, unverifiable, that they believe. Now, the next thing is scientists need to believe in cosmic inflation and multiverses. Cosmic inflation is the idea that when the Big Bang took place, it happened really, really fast for a very, very short amount of time, and then it did the expansion of the universe. They come up with that duct tape theory, because that's what it is, in order to correct all the science that the Big Bang contradicts. And same thing with believing in multiverses. I mean, has anybody ever seen a multiverse outside our own universe? If you said yes, then you've watched way too many Marvel comic movies. So they have to believe in cosmic inflation and multiverses to make the Big Bang work. These are unseen and unscientific situations that they believe in. Now, after the Big Bang, they also believe in population 3 stars. These are believed to be the first stars from the Big Bang. They're comprised of helium, hydrogen, and sprinkles of lithium. These stars comprised of the lightest elements on the periodic table. They went supernova, that is, they exploded, and this resulted cooking up the heavier elements and metals on the periodic table. This is where all our chemicals came from, according to them. Here's the problem, folks. Problem is, no one has ever seen a population 3 star. They don't exist. It is simply a belief to fill in the gaps of what they don't know. In fact, the formation of stars and planets themselves are a belief in the unseen. They have never seen a star or a planet form. They will say, of course, no one has ever seen one form because it takes millions of years for that to happen. Does it? Or do they believe that? Why do they believe that? Maybe men, years ago, wrote ideas in a book. Ideas that no one has ever seen in observable, testable, repeatable science. And now they believe the information because respected men wrote in a book many years ago. I don't know. That's starting to sound a little bit like religion, but we'll keep testing this. Life. The atheist must also believe that life came from non-life, something never seen or observed by science. And at some point, they must believe that something that never thought just started thinking. Then he must believe something that never communicated before all of a sudden had something to say. And say it to another life form that hasn't yet developed the ability to even receive communication. So something out there is purring or ticking or humming or whistling, and everybody else has no idea what he's saying. But we got to wait millions of years and able to hear what this guy's trying to tell us. The belief in the unseen continues. The atheist believes that something that could reproduce all by itself, like cells, they now require male and female to reproduce. Again, not observable, testable, repeatable science. This is belief. It's belief in the unseen. It's not just belief in the unseen. It's belief in things that contradict science. And it's a belief that, by the way, is also state-funded by your tax dollars, all the way from elementary school to our state universities. This is a very simplistic list I'm providing of the amount of unseen belief required to be a naturalistic atheist. Naturalistic, meaning they only believe in nature, they only believe in material. I'm presenting this in a way that isn't deep nerd. When you continue to go down the details of cosmic evolution, stellar and planetary evolution, chemical and biological evolution, there is a lot of faith required to believe in this story. Atheist, unscientific faith goes beyond the boundaries of scientific method, the scientific method of observable, testable, repeatable. If I presuppose God in the beginning, what do I mean by presuppose? It means I simply believe God is the first cause. I believe God came first, not dirt or nothing. If I presuppose God in the beginning, it's actually more scientific than in the beginning, nothing or dirt. I mean, just take a look at Genesis 1:1 for a moment. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is so scientifically important. Genesis 1:1 is a necessary scientific statement for anything to exist. For anything to exist, you have to have time, space, and matter. If you have matter, but no space, you have no place to put the matter. If you have matter and not time, well then, when would it be? Did it become before or after? You have no time. So you see, time, space, and matter must come into existence all at the same time for anything to exist. So look at Genesis 1:1. It says, in the beginning, that's time. God created the heavens, that's space, and the earth, and that's matter. And when you start with this biblical truth, in the beginning God, which happens to be scientific truth as well, everything else becomes quite reasonable from a biblical perspective. If you understand that everything begins with God, then creation spoken into existence now becomes a reasonable possibility because you started with God. Even miracles are now possible. Jesus walking on water, why not? Jesus rising from the dead, totally doable. All of it. Not just possible, but expected if in the beginning, God. All of these things are possible and probable. But in the beginning, dirt does not automatically result into a fine-tuned universe. Dirt doesn't know how to organize the universe on a razor's edge for existence to be reality. Life from non-life. How much life is in a grain of sand? Thought from non-thought. Dirt don't think. Communication from something that never spoke before. No matter what King Wasabi says to you, the land does not speak to you. Each one of those unverified claims are standalone unscientific beliefs, which has no meaning or relationship to one another. This is not science. This is faith. It is the atheistic, unscientific faith. It takes a lot of faith and scientific contradiction to believe there is no God. Now, what we see in the scientific world is that life begets life. Beget, that means that life comes from life. And we see like intelligence comes from like intelligence. Similar communication comes from something that had similar communication abilities. So scientifically speaking, it is actually more scientific to believe in the beginning God. Because the God of the Bible tells us we were created in his image. Therefore, we have life because our life comes from God who is life. We have our reason and ability to communicate from something that possessed those qualities before us, and that is God. What do we see in the observable, testable, repeatable world we know? We see that life comes from life, and thought comes from thought, and communication comes from communication. Therefore, it is actually more scientific to believe our life came from life, and our intelligence came from intelligence, and our ability to communicate on such an advanced level all comes from someone who possessed these attributes before us. And that is why we have them. And that is consistent with the scientific world we actually observe. Now, let's talk about more evidence for God. From the observable, testable, repeatable knowledge of irreducible complexity. Irreducible complexity. I know I told you guys I'm not going to use nerd words, and they're not really. They only sound like a nerd word because I put two of them together. Complexity, it's just things that are complicated, right? And then irreducible. It just simply means that you cannot make it smaller or you can't take a piece away from it, all right? Irreducible complexity. To give you an example, it's kind of, think of like a car. If you need to drive to work, what can you do without? The engine, the transmission, or the four wheels? Take one away and you can't replace it with anything else, all right? And how are you going to get to work? Well, you need all of it, don't you? You need all of it at the same time for that car to work. So that's an example of irreducible complexity. All right, now when Darwin proposed his theory, Darwinian evolution in the mid-1800s, the cell was thought to be little more than a blob of jelly. With primitive microscopes, it looked like a featureless sac that allowed Darwin and early biologists to assume life could spontaneously arise fairly easily. But modern biology and molecular genetics and biochemistry have blown that myth apart. Even the simplest known cell is more like a microscopic city than a blob. A cell, invisible to the naked eye, is not only more complex than a space shuttle, it is more complex than all of NASA. A cell has a membrane, like skin. It acts like city walls. It has protein gates regulating what is allowed inside the cell and what can leave the cell. Without this, the cell dies. A cell has something called cytoplasm, which is like jelly in a donut. This jelly keeps all the parts of the cell in their place and allows for transportation of proteins and molecules within the cell. Without it, the cell dies. Ribosomes, these are nanofactories that process DNA information and then crank out the production of specific proteins required for the cell to live. Without it, guess what? It dies. DNA, comprised of billions of letters arranged in a digital code, is used in the cell. Without it, it dies. And just DNA, which is organized complex information, screams a creator. All right, if you got a code, you got to have a code maker. There are enzymes in the cell. These enzymes do the work of the cell. Without them, the cell dies. And finally, the cells have power plants that generate the power to run this microscopic Detroit. If the cell is missing just one of these, just the simple cell, well, it's not simple, but the basic building blocks of our lives, if all of these things are not there at one time, these cells die and there's no life. And just like space, time, and matter all had to come into existence at the same time, so did the living cell, or there would be no life. To believe in a different story requires more unseen magic and faith than to believe in God. Let's talk about something less nerdy. Let's talk about a woodpecker. Everybody likes a woodpecker, and not many of us have seen cells, but we've seen woodpeckers. Every time we hear that guy hitting on some wood, man, we got to find out where he is and check him out. They're fun. Let's see what the Bible says in Job chapter 12, 7 and 9. It says, "But ask the animals, and they will teach you, or the birds in the sky, and they will tell you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this?" All right? Most of us, like I said, most of us haven't seen a cell, but we've seen a woodpecker. Y'all should check out my friend's DVD collection called Incredible Creatures That Defy Evolution by Dr. Job Martin. You can find it on Amazon. I don't get paid for that. That's not advertising. It's just really good stuff for your kids, for your family, for you. It's entertaining and very, very educational. And it shows how incredibly, irreducibly complex the animal kingdom is. One of the dozens of animals he breaks down is the woodpecker. And remember, we're talking about irreducible complexity. This little headbanger has a special skull. The skull is so special that engineers actually study the skull of the woodpecker in order to create effective helmets, and also how the beak is attached to the skull of the bird for impact tools. And so, you know, if human engineers want to know something, they go to the great engineer, and that's the creator. So anyway, this little headbanger has a special skull that reduces impact from beating a hole in wood with his face. All right. It has a special beak for puncturing wood. It has a special connection between the beak and the skull to further reduce impact. If those things aren't there, the bird breaks its skull or beak and dies. Right? It also has an extra long tongue to reach those pesky bugs deep inside the tree. It has a special area in his head where his tongue coils up, and that area is also used as a seatbelt for his little bird brain while he does his head banging. Pretty convenient. The tongue is barbed in order to collect those bugs. It has these little pokey things at the end of his tongue. It also has a sticky substance to help collect the bugs. And it has check this out, a degluing substance in his head. So his sticky tongue, when it goes back and coils in his head, it doesn't stick to itself. Y'all, are you hearing what I'm saying about the woodpecker? This is irreducible complexity. If all these tools aren't present, this bird does not peck wood. Period. And why, if it's not able to peck wood, why would it ever develop the ability to peck wood? It would find another way to find its food and develop skills that way. I mean, that's That's just reasonable. And not just the woodpecker's ability to peck wood, but also the fact that it's a bird, period. And what it takes to fly as a bird. It needs special bones, a special digestive system, a special engineered respiratory system, an engineered cardiovascular system, special skin to grow feathers, and complex feathers. Feathers are amazing. And on top of that, intricate muscular system required to use those feathers. If all of God's wisdom of engineering is not present at the same time, the bird doesn't fly. And if the bird doesn't fly, birds go extinct. Well, unless you're a chicken protected by KFC or you're the size of an ostrich, then you can probably make it. Now, there are small little flightless birds, but they live on isolated islands without predators. So there you go. But if these birds are waiting around for the evolutionary ability to fly, they're going to die. All right. Now, I've debated atheists dozens of times and over the last couple of decades, and they all charge the Christian for believing in the unseen. And atheists claim their truth comes from science. Now, I hope I have demonstrated up to this point that the naturalistic atheist believes in many unseen and unscientific stories. They believe that nothing created everything. They believe in multiverses and cosmic inflation. Now, you can go research those things yourself. Cosmic inflation is really good. It has to do with the flatness of the universe, that the universe doesn't explode or implode on itself. The fact that the balance of the universe is so perfect, the amount of space, the amount of gravity, and the amount of matter, the ratio of those three are so perfect in order for existence to take place. And if the ratio was off, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And the fact that one end of the universe has very similar temperature as the other end of the universe is actually not plausible from the Big Bang. Those two temperature sides shouldn't have anything to do with each other. I know I'm getting a little nerdy, but this is the truth. This is it. They don't understand that because there's not enough light years. There's not enough years in the Big Bang or the universe. The universe, I think, is something like 13.8 billion years old. That's not enough time for starlight to get from one end of the universe to the other end of the universe so that both sides have the same temperature. That's why they come up with the cosmic inflation. This is called the horizon problem, by the way. That's why they come up with cosmic inflation. And then they come up with multiverses in order to, but really, honestly, just put duct tape on the Big Bang. These things are things they believe and they've never seen. They're just ideas. They're just ideas inside a story. Now, they believe in population 3 stars that we talked about earlier. They've never seen those. They believe life came from non-life, which they've never seen. They believe reason came from something that never thought before. And they believe communication started from a life form that never communicated once to anything. All of these are unseen and unscientific and are actually contrary to the science we observe, test, and repeat. This is the atheist unscientific faith. Now, compare that to the real science, which is observable, testable, repeatable. We see that creatures with life, intelligence, and communication come from creatures with similar qualities. That's what we see in our scientific world. The Bible tells us we came from God and we're created in His image. And our life, our reason, communication, and keep going, morality, justice, love, sense of beauty, and value all come from someone who already possessed those qualities, just as we observe in our scientific world. Add to that the observable, testable, repeatable science we discover among irreducible complexity that we mentioned before. In creation, all the way from the microscopic cell to the sustaining of spiral galaxies. It is all fine-tuned and complex. Now, we've heard the voices of science, and yes, they speak with fascination and wonder. We've seen the data, the discoveries, the dazzling complexity of creation. But hear me now. Science is not the supreme measure of truth. Truth does not bow to the laboratory, and certainly not to the guy in the lab coat. Truth does not answer to the microscope. Truth begins and ends with God. And that might not be popular these days, but that's the truth. Remember, almost 30% of our country here in America is non-religious. Atheists, agnostics, which are just baby atheists, and other people that really don't take God very seriously. This group of people is growing. And so when you say truth begins and ends with God, that's not popular, but that's the truth. We don't believe in God because science happens to point in his direction. Far deeper than that. Science can only exist if in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. He is the Alpha, the foundation, the reason science has order, the reason discovery is even possible. We talked about that in episode 1. Without God, there is no truth. Without God, there is no science. And catch this. It is not the job of science to prove God. If science could prove God, then science would rise above him, becoming the final authority in our lives. But God alone sits enthroned as the source of all truth. Check out Proverbs 1:7. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, folks. Science, rightly understood, is a servant, not the master. We can only know anything at all because God made a world that can be known. If there was no God, our thoughts and our science wouldn't even make sense. Check out the Gospel of John. It says this, John 1:3. "All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made." And John there, he's specifically talking about Jesus. And then Paul speaks of Jesus as well. And he says in Colossians 1:16 through 17, "By him," that's Jesus, "all things were created in heaven and on earth. And in him," check this one out, folks, "all things hold together." He's holding everything together with his power. That is the reason science works. The reason gravity pulls, the reason cells divide, the reason stars burn, because Christ upholds all things by the word of his power. Hebrews 1:3. So to see the world as it truly is, we must look at science through the lens of the Creator's word. That's the Bible. For the knowledge of science is subject to the knowledge of God. Science does not prove God. God proves we can have science. You got to get the priorities straight here, folks. We've had them backwards for way too long. The existence of God is not on some kind of scientific trial. On the contrary, how we view God in science is on trial. Will you believe and trust the word of God about yourself and about this world? Or will you believe and trust the ideas of man that are here today and gone tomorrow? Which leads us to the next stage in our journey in the truth in the dark. Has God spoken? What has he said? Can we trust it? Our next episode will be, how do we know the Bible is from God and not just from some dudes? Now, before we go, I want to end with this little story that I absolutely love. Back in the late 1800s, an agnostic, a baby atheist, challenged a great Bible teacher named H.A. Ironside to a public debate in San Francisco. Ironside agreed, but with one condition. He told the agnostic, bring with you just one person whose life was broken. Their life was broken. Someone down and out, a drunk, a druggie, a criminal, who found hope and transformation through atheism or agnosticism. If you can, I'll bring 100 men and women whose lives were radically changed for the good by the knowledge of Jesus Christ. The agnostic never produced a single witness. The debate never happened because, in truth, the argument was already over before it even began. Guys, if you like this stuff, episode 1 and episode 2, a lot more is coming out, and I'm looking forward to it. Your support, it keeps Truth in the Dark alive. Covering the cost of each episode, I have monthly expenses and equipment, but beyond the expenses, your generosity helps share light and truth with those searching for real answers in a dark world. Every gift, no matter the size, makes a difference. Even the price of a cup of coffee each month helps the lights stay on. To support, simply scan this QR code right here or click the link in the description to buy me a coffee. Now, you've been listening to Truth in the Dark, where light cuts through the shadows. Remember, though this world with devils filled threaten to undo us, we do not fear, for God has willed His truth to triumph through us. Thanks for joining me.